Welcome back to Women of Grit Podcast. I'm Dr. Ahne, the Gritpreneur, host of this podcast, and I have our guest here with us today, Backley, all the way from New Zealand, already in tomorrow, and we're just going to continue from where we left off. We're talking about you being an author. You have 8 books. You have 7 published, 1 at the editors and 2 more in the pipeline. So we're talking about your latest book called 70 Years Worth of Travel. And the next, I was reading through the book. I travel vicariously through others when I can travel myself. So you made it to Tunisia and Egypt, both in Africa, but not the Gambia. And you said South Africa is on your bucket list. As you know, I'm from Africa, Cameroon specifically, and I'm sometimes bewildered by the prevailing narrative about that part of the world. Can you share with our listeners your perspective based on your travels and what fascinates you about the African continent?
Yes, of course. Well, I have to say, first things first, I haven't been to South Africa. My geography is very bad, so I don't actually know where Cameroon is exactly.
I'll tell you.
You must educate me on that.
Cameroon is west central. So we are the furthest Western African country, we're closest to the central part of Africa. We are neighbors with Nigeria. Most people know where Nigeria is, so we're neighbors. Nigeria is to our west. So, just as you make that turn to go west in Africa, Cameroon is right there in that little angle.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah.
On my bucket list, I mean, the whole of Africa is on my bucket list, but so far I've just done Tunisia, Morocco, and Egypt. So I've only touched on North Africa, really. I just would like to say on the front cover of my book, I don't know if you realize, that's actually me in 1985 with all the Fijian kids. So
right, yeah, I figured.
when I looked a bit younger. Okay.
You know what? We all go through it. So,
absolutely.
Okay, so talking, I actually said South Africa is on your bucket list. So that's, of course, South Africa is way south. And as we always say, Africa is a continent. It's very diverse, 51 countries. It's very diverse geographically, culturally. Africa is a continent. As we say, it's not a country. So I'm glad that you've had some, experiences. I know you actually had your ticket or deposit for the Gambia, and you suspect your ex-husband was scared of needles. So that's why that trip was canceled. How did you take that? How did you take having to cancel that trip?
I was so cross because before I go anywhere in the world, I always do quite a lot of research because I'm not the kind of person that just likes to go and lie on a beach. I like to find out about the culture, meet lots of people, local people, and, see anything I need to see. So I'd done loads of research about the Gambia. I was really excited. And then he just said, oh, no, I don't think, we're too busy at work. We were running a business at the time. I was cross. I'm still cross. I mean, that was, I don't know, however long ago that was, and in the 80s, and I'm still cross. So, yeah, because it's a challenge unfulfilled. And hopefully one day I will get to, not necessarily the Gambia, but there's lots of many more interesting countries, I think, in the continent of Africa.
Exactly. So you have your copy of...
I do.
70 years worth of travel. So I want you to indulge me and go to page 166. And it's a very poignant part, but one in which I totally understand. I get it. Some of our listeners may not really understand what was going on here, Pat, but I got it. it resonated with me, because funerals, we cry. We go all out and we cry. So I can see you as you describe it. I don't know if you can read it. If not, I will read it.
Yes,
but I totally
I'm
get
happy
it.
to read it.
And this is just to set the stage. You're talking about just getting back to Fiji, all excited to reconnect with your friend, and you get some bad news. And so this is at her funeral. So that starts around, you could start from around where it says, everyone who has loved deeply.
Okay.
That's on page 166.
Okay. Everyone who has loved deeply will know the depth of my sorrow. I was absolutely beside myself, heartbroken. Her funeral will live forever in my heart. The Fijian way of grieving is much healthier than ours. People do not try to keep a stiff upper lip. Instead, they allow their grief and sorrow to show. Therefore, it seemed quite natural for me to prostrate myself across Naomi's coffin, weeping loudly and not caring what others might have thought. I wept as I said a few words about my best friend at the church service, and wept again as they lowered her body into the ground, covering her coffin with beautiful traditional tablecloth. I felt honoured that I was allowed to take part in such a personal family affair. Another chapter in my life was over, but the friendship between Naomi and me will always be known and remembered. I was happy that there were now threads for the next generation to weave. My Lucy already held my Fijian family in her heart, and I knew they felt the same about her. Sorry, a bit emotional.
It is emotional, Pat, and I really thank you for sharing her with us. She obviously was so special to you, so special that her family invited you in to such a private, personal celebration of life. And I felt bad even picking that particular passage for you to read, but that snatched me. It literally snatched me. It put me in Fiji. I've never been to Fiji, but Fiji is as far away from Cameroon as you can imagine, but that is our culture.
Totally.
Isn't it amazing?
it is.
Fiji, way over there.
Yeah, I know.
And way over here.
Yes, and very often, Dr. Ahne, I see photographs of Africans in Africa, and it could be my family in Fiji. It's obvious that there is a massive connection, really. Right. On the back of that book is not the back of that one, the back of my memoirs is a photograph of myself as an adult with a big very handsome Fijian man. Now his name is Joe. He was Naomi's son, and he came with his mum to live at my house when he was 10 years old, and he's now in his 50s. So, he calls me mum. We're very connected. But Naomi and I were so close. I miss her terribly. We were friends for 45 years. Two women from totally different backgrounds, totally. I met her because she was my housekeeper, but within 2 days she was my friend, and the fact that she hoovered my floors was a bonus. But we were so close, and that changed my life hugely, that connection.
Thank you so much for sharing her with me. I was a little nervous about even bringing that up, but your writing, I got it. It's like I said, it snatched my heart, and I just felt, I was like, oh, this is a tricky one. I don't want to make Pat cry, but this just touched me so much.
I just want to share this with you. This is a photograph. I don't know if you can see it very well of Naomi. Now this photograph was on her coffin. You know how you have a photograph on the coffin. And when I saw it, I said to Joe at the day of the funeral, I said, oh, I was in that photo as well, and you've cut me off because I was sitting talking to her. This was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And he said, oh, yes, Marama. He said, well, they call me Marama. He said, oh, yes, Marama. He said, well, we didn't want to use a photo of mum looking old. So we found this old one from when she was young in her 30s with you. He said, but we didn't want you on the photo, so we chopped you off. Anyway, the day after, they all came to my house. The whole family came to my house because I used to have a house in Fiji, and they brought me this photograph.
Aww.
And so it's one of my most treasured possessions, and I have it in my office all the time, so that Naomi is with me all the time.
I look at Naomi, she could be any one of my aunties.
Oh,
Honestly,
totally.
she could be any one of my aunties. Yeah. So still on the thank you again for sharing her with us. And I read that passage, and like I said, the only reason I brought it up is because it just touched something so deep within me. I wanted to share that connection and how your writing can really just pull people in. It gave me a side of just understanding that people are more similar than they are different. And absolutely. I felt Fijian in that moment because I totally understood what that was about. So talking about being an author, what have you learned from being an author that people should know?
I think I've learned that we all have things inside us that need to come out, because when I think now, all the books I've written 3 fiction, which are historical sagas, 3 fiction books, and then all the other ones. That was all in my head, obviously, for all those years, and how tragic it would be to die with those still in my head. So I've become a bit of a missionary now. I say to people, oh, you must write your life story down, because once you die, your story dies, because nobody knows our stories like we do. We're the only people that know our truths, really. So I think it's just made me a whole person, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It says we should each embrace our unique journeys. Yes. Nobody knows you like you. Nobody can tell your story like you can. So absolutely. What's the most difficult part about being an author? I mean, for me, just how prolific you are in such a short time. I don't know what you could say about the difficulty is, but it seems like the words are just bursting out of you and just flowing, But in case there are any challenges, after all, in case there are any challenges, share with us.
I think for me personally, because I'm obviously blessed that I have all these words that are just waiting to fly out. For me personally, writing is not a challenge. Writing is an absolute joy. And when I have to go, because of other things, I have to go days without writing, I feel bereft. When I've got a bit of time and I can sit at my desk and write, I feel, this is joyful, this is heavenly. So for me, the writing is easy. The hard bit is marketing. These days, there's so many millions of books published every day. To get your books noticed is obviously a challenge. So for me, the marketing is the hardest bit. But I'm even getting to grips with that. I'm very proud of myself. As an old lady, I've now learned about, obviously, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So I'm on all of those, which is... My daughter said to me the other day, Mum, she said, you're very smart. She said, I don't even do all those things. So that's good. It's a necessity. I think when you've got no one else to rely on and ask these things, you just you realize how strong you are. I think that's what this has all taught me. And writing my personal memoirs, that was very cathartic, because I've had a lot of dramas and ups and downs, and here I am standing happy, whatever. And writing those down was very good, because it made me think, actually, I have survived a lot. And yeah, I am a warrior woman, and a woman of grit. So yeah, so writing for me is a joy.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end of this conversation. I'm not even going to say interview. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I look at photographs again. I've got a photograph of me when I was young on my desk, and every so often I talk to her because I was a very shy, tiny little girl who had no confidence really. Apart from the fact I came from a happy home, I still didn't have confidence in the outer world. And I think I would look at her and say, it's going to be all right. Just hang on in there. Don't let life get you down. Always bounce back. I had a sister who couldn't bounce back and she committed suicide. And so when my daughter was growing up, I often used to say to her, when she was going through the teenage angst, I used to say, darling, you have two choices in life. You either give in like Auntie Margaret did, or you bounce back. And I think that's the advice I would always give, however awful life is, just try and keep going. Because you never know what's around the corner. And in fact, a quote on the back of my personal memoirs, which I firmly believe, and Lucy said I used to say it to her all the time when she was little. I used to say, life is like a jigsaw. You have to look back at it to see how it all fell into place. And I really do believe that, because without all those dramas and traumas in my life, I wouldn't be here where I am now on the other side of the world as an author. So yeah, life's good.
So absolutely. We'll come to that when we talk about being a woman of grit. So what's the biggest takeaway you hope our listeners learn today?
I think just never give up. And if you get any opportunity, just grab it, because you never know. You never know what it's going to be. I always remember before I was going out to Fiji, I was 25 years old. I'd never left England, apart from the odd little trip. And a lady who'd been a diplomat's wife and travelled all over the world. I worked in the bank at the time. And she just came up to me at the counter and we were chatting. And I said, oh, I'm leaving next week. I'm going to go and live in Fiji for 2 years. She said, now, my dear, I'm going to give you a bit of advice. She said, accept every invitation you get, even if you don't want to go. She said, because there just might be one interesting person there you can meet that will become your friend. And I just thought, that's such sensible advice. So I tried to follow it, and it did produce so many lovely things. And now I try and do that in life. Sometimes you get invited to something, you think, oh, and then you go and you meet this fabulous person that you would never have met. And like if I hadn't and you hadn't accepted the invitation to write in the Warrior Women book,
Absolutely.
we would never have met.
That's true.
So, I think that would be my thing. Just try and grab every opportunity that life throws at you.
Take a chance,
Some of it
enjoy
will
a
be good.
challenge.
Yeah, some of it will be good, some of it won't. But at least you can. I don't want to be like my mum. My mum died at 93, full of regret. Regret for things that she hadn't done because she had a hard life,
Yeah.
And in fact, the latest lot of books I'm writing are my ancestors series. So I'm writing the life stories of my ancestors, just wrapped up in fiction. So I'm in the middle of writing about mum's life now. And it's so sad because she started as a young woman with big hopes and dreams, and then life squashed those, but she never was able to bounce back. Oh, and so she died full of regret. And that's the one thing I'm determined not to do.
Right, right.
I'd rather regret things I've done and made a mess than not done.
Absolutely. So is there anything I left out that you would like the audience to know about you, Pat Backley?
No, I don't think so. I think I would just like to say thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can through my website. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to another 30 years of writing books. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, you can't run off quite yet until you answer my last question. So grit is defined as perseverance and passion for meaningful long-term goals despite setbacks and obstacles. And in this conversation, we've talked about some of the setbacks that you encountered and some of the challenges that you encountered. So what does being a woman of grit mean to you, Pat Backley?
I think it just means never giving up, you know, just life is hard. I mean, life is hard. And I've had times when I couldn't afford to eat and stuff like that. And it would be very easy to give up, you know, and like when your husband of 26 years suddenly says, oh, I don't love you anymore. I haven't loved you for years. You're worthless. At times like that, the easiest thing to do is to crawl into your shell and give up. But I would say, just for me, being a woman of grit is to just keep going, grit your teeth and try and smile.
Absolutely, Pat. I mean, it is. I mean, you are the quintessential woman of grit. I talk about, I had a troubled relationship. I often say when I left that relationship, I was a caterpillar. But eventually I became a butterfly. I am a woman of grit. So we overcame challenges, we persevered despite all the setbacks, all the challenges, because we had a meaningful goal we're passionate about. So thank you, Pat, for coming on the Woman of Grit podcast. So where can listeners find you online and social media?
Okay, well, my website is just www.patbackley.com. And I'm on all the things as Pat Backley author or varieties of that. So I'm very easy to find.
Okay.
And yes, thank you so much for having me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
And your books, where can they buy your books?
Because they're all on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the normal places you would expect to find them, really. And they're available as ebooks, which are only the price of a cup of coffee, or paperbacks.
I saw that when I got my paperbacks. So it has been an absolute pleasure. I've had I spent some time with author Pat Backley, who wrote her first book at the age of 70, and she has 7 published books, the 8th one at the editors, and 2 more on the way. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all the way from tomorrow in New Zealand. Thank you, and I am pretty sure we'll do this again sometime. So take care.
Thank you so much.
All right then.